All right, so this week you're finishing up talking about the Civil War, and one of the biggest things that happened at the end of the Civil War was this thing called the Emancipation Proclamation. Two big words, but they're pretty simple. Emancipation means to set free. To emancipate is to set free, and proclamation is something that you proclaimed or announced. So the Emancipation Proclamation is a announcement that people are being set free. This is something that Lincoln wrote. Lincoln was the one who freed the slaves, right? Well, check out this little quote from Lincoln. He says, "My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union, and is not either to save or to destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that." And that in this part at the end here is in fact what he ends up doing. Why did Lincoln free the slaves? First of all, yes, it's true. He was against slavery. We all know that. That's what he ran on. It's a big part of his life. But also, it's a little more complicated than that. Him actually freeing the slaves using the Emancipation Proclamation was a way to cause slave revolts in the South and help win the war. So here's how things have been going for the first couple of years of the Civil War. The Union, that's the North, had lost every major battle leading up to it. The Confederacy, in the South, was trying to convince Great Britain and France to help them in the war. That would have been disastrous for the North. Lincoln thought that the Union needed a win. He wanted to convince Great Britain and France that they shouldn't support the South, and he did this in a couple of ways. He wanted to show that the North could win big battles, that they weren't useless on the battlefield. But two, he wanted to show Great Britain and France that they were the good guys. Great Britain and France had already outlawed slavery a while ago. Lincoln wanted to make it very clear that the South was fighting for slavery, and of course, Great Britain and France couldn't support a rebel faction that was fighting to preserve something so horrible. So, Lincoln's chance to look strong and appeal to Great Britain and France came at Antietam on September 17th, 1862. It was a brutal battle. You notice this number right here. There were 22,700 people that were killed or injured or captured on this battle. One of the ways that the Union was finally able to get a win here was a stroke of luck. It says that a copy of Lee's plans was discovered by Union soldiers and given to the Union General George B. McClellan. This was probably the only decent thing that McClellan did. He was kind of a bumbling fool, but when he has the plans of the enemy, it turns out he was able to do something good. So he attacked General Lee's army and had a bit of a victory. Even so, the North had a higher death total than the South. Lincoln was a lawyer. He knew the law. He loved the law. He was really dorky about whether things were perfectly worded and the letter of the law. And he didn't want to do anything that was against the Constitution. And he didn't think that the Constitution allowed him to declare as president that slavery was illegal. He's right. That's a law that would have to be passed by Congress. And presidents aren't allowed to just make laws like that. We know when we talked about how the government works. So what could he do? Here's what he figured out. Watch this. This is like a math problem or a logic problem. Because, A, slave owners believed their slaves were property, right? We already have discussed that. And B, Southern states were in active rebellion. And C, this is kind of the rules of war, property that's captured in war belongs to the government that captures it, right? Well, so he figured that out. Therefore, any property, which we're talking about slaves now, right? Captured from southern states in rebellion would be set free by the government which now owns them. If the North is able to capture slaves, then they get to do whatever they want with them. Whether Congress doesn't have to write a law. Abraham Lincoln is the commander-in-chief, and those slaves now belong to the government of the United States, of which Lincoln is in charge. So he gets to free them. So he announces this Emancipation Proclamation. I'm not going to read any of the text of it. There's some opportunities for you to read some text of it in your assignments. but I want you to understand the background of why it happened and what it did. Here's what it did. It only freed the slaves in these red states. It didn't free any slaves in these states, these border states that were slave-holding states but did not join the rebellion. Those slaves had to wait until the 13th Amendment, which happened after the Civil War. We'll get more on how Congress was finally able to pass some pretty radical amendments. And it has to do with the fact that all these southern states weren't allowed to send representatives to Congress anymore because they were rebelling. This brings up a lot of questions about how we should think about Lincoln. He was against slavery and he worked to end it, but he also said that ending slavery wasn't his top priority, and he called slaves property and took out half measures without freeing every slave. So you get to decide how you want to think about Lincoln. He wasn't a perfect saint. He wasn't the shining star of morality. He was a very complicated person. You get to decide how you think of him. That's up to you.